Tessa Hollis gripped the mic with trembling fingers, her heart pounding like a drum beneath the soft lilac fabric of her dress. She wasn't used to singing in front of hundreds of people, especially not at weddings where emotions ran high and every note felt like it carried someone's forever. But this was her best friend's big day, and Tessa had promised her she'd do it. No backing out now? The piano started, soft and slow. Tessa took a shaky breath and began to sing. Her voice, warm and full, floated through the garden like a breeze at sunset. The guests, seated beneath strings of fairy lights and surrounded by white roses, fell silent. Every eye was on her. Except one pair, halfway back in the crowd, that didn't just watch. They studied her. Saw her. Soren Callahan leaned forward in his chair, his drink forgotten in his hand. He didn't know who she was. Didn't know her name, where she came from, whether she was single or not. But something about the way she closed her eyes during the chorus, how her voice cracked just slightly on the high note like she meant every word, he couldn't look away. She was beautiful, sure. But it wasn't just that. She felt real. Raw. Like she wasn't performing, she was just giving. He didn't even realize he was holding his breath until the song ended. The guests burst into applause. The bride wiped a tear. And Tessa stepped back, cheeks flushed, smile shaky, clearly relieved it was over. Soren didn't clap. He couldn't. His hands were frozen like the rest of him. He just watched her walk off the platform and disappear behind a hedge. Earth to Soren, muttered his sister, flicking his arm from the seat beside him. You okay? Who was that? He asked, eyes still locked on the place Tessa had vanished. No idea. You interested? He didn't answer. Soren wasn't the type to chase women. Not anymore. Not since he took over Callahan Holdings and became one of the youngest billionaires in Manhattan. His world was boardrooms and private jets, not garden weddings and love songs. But something had just shifted. He felt it. He had to meet her. Behind the tent, Tessa exhaled hard and leaned against a tree, her hand pressed to her chest. Her dress clung to her back with sweat. That had been terrifying. But she'd done it. She hadn't cracked, hadn't run off stage. She'd actually finished the song. Hey, a voice said gently. Tessa jumped. Oh, sorry. I didn't realize anyone was back here. The groom's cousin, a girl named Lila, smiled at her. Just came to say you were amazing. Seriously. People are crying. And I think the bride might love you more than the groom now. Tessa laughed, but inside her nerves still buzzed. Thanks. I was shaking the whole time. Lila handed her a bottle of water. You're not a professional singer? No, Tessa said, twisting the cap. I work at a bookstore. I just sing sometimes. When I can. Well, you should do it more, Lila said. Some guy in the audience looked like he was falling in love with you. Tessa made a face. Yeah, right? I'm serious. Tall, dark blonde hair, sitting next to a woman in green. He did not blink the whole time. Like, at all. Tessa shrugged it off, but later, when she returned to the reception and scanned the crowd, she couldn't help wondering who he was. Soren didn't stay long at the reception. He made polite conversation, took a few photos with the bride and groom, then slipped out early. He had business in the morning. Always did. But on the drive back to his penthouse, all he could think about was her. He didn't even know her name, but he was already picturing her voice echoing through the marble halls of his home, singing softly as she danced barefoot across his living room. It was ridiculous. He wasn't the kind of guy who daydreamed about strangers. Still, when he got home, he called his assistant. Find out who sang at the Cormac wedding tonight, he said. Yes, Mr. Callahan. He hung up and stared out the window at the city lights. He didn't know why this mattered so much. But it did. Tessa didn't expect to hear from anyone after the wedding. She went back to her tiny apartment, her 2 part-time jobs, and the music she only sang when no one was listening. She figured the wedding was a one-time thing. A sweet memory. Until 4 days later, when a man in a black suit walked into the bookstore and asked for her by name. Tessa Hollis, he said, holding out a card. She blinked. Yeah? My name is Vincent. I work for Mr. Callahan. He'd like to invite you to dinner. She stared at him. Who? Mr. Soren Callahan. CEO of Callahan Holdings. She laughed. Is this a prank? No, miss. He was at the wedding last weekend. Her mouth opened, closed. Why? He said he enjoyed your performance. He'd like to meet you properly. Tessa stared at the card. It was heavy, sleek, embossed with gold. This wasn't just some guy. This was someone rich, powerful, and apparently interested. The restaurant was on the top floor of a building she couldn't even afford to enter on a normal day. The hostess greeted her by name, took her coat, and led her to a private table set against a window overlooking the skyline. Soren was already there, standing as she approached. He wore a black suit, no tie, his hair slightly tousled like he hadn't bothered to fix it after work. But his eyes, those were sharp. Focused. On her. Tessa, he said, offering his hand. Thank you for coming. She shook it, still confused. You really tracked me down because I sang one song? I didn't just hear you sing, he said, motioning for her to sit. I saw you. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since. She laughed, nervous. That's intense. I don't do things halfway. The waiter arrived. He ordered for them steak for him, sea bass for her, with a bottle of wine she couldn't pronounce. They talked. At first, it was awkward. She wasn't used to this world, white tablecloths, crystal glasses, men who owned companies. But he was surprisingly easy to talk to. Funny. Direct. And he listened. Really listened. She told him about her bookstore job, her tiny apartment, how she'd once wanted to study music but couldn't afford the tuition. He told her about his company, how he inherited it young, how most people only saw the money but not the pressure. By dessert, she was laughing. You know this is crazy, right? She said. We don't even know each other. I'd like to change that, he said. If you'll let me. She looked at him. He was rich. Out of her league. Probably used to girls who wore designer dresses and didn't flinch at $500 wine. But something about him made her feel seen. Heard. Really wanted for the first time in a long time. Okay, she said quietly. Let's see where this goes. He smiled. And it wasn't the cold, closed-off smirk she'd expected from a billionaire. It was something else. Something real. And just like that, the girl who sang at a wedding had unknowingly started writing the first lines of her own love story. With the man who was already falling for her. Tessa had never stepped inside a place like this before. The elevator opened directly into Soren's penthouse, and for a moment she forgot how to move. She'd been to apartments with charm, to lofts that tried to look expensive. But this wasn't pretending. This was real. The walls were glass, the sky was endless, and somewhere far below, the city moved on without her. Soren walked ahead, his jacket already off, sleeves rolled to his forearms. I figured we'd eat in tonight, he said without turning. I had the chef prepare something light. She followed slowly, trying not to gape at the way everything shimmered like the countertops were poured from moonlight and the furniture was sculpted from silence. It was the kind of home that didn't just suggest money. It announced it unapologetically. I hope you're not expecting me to be impressed by the view, she said, hanging her coat awkwardly by the door. He glanced back, amused. You're not. I'm impressed by the fact you own a piano with no dust on it. That's suspicious. I play, he said simply. You play? She repeated, eyebrows raised. What, like actual music? Or do you just press a few keys when investors come over? He tilted his head, walking toward the piano. Come see. She crossed the room cautiously, her heels clicking on polished floors that probably cost more than her rent. Soren sat on the bench, hands poised above the keys like he'd done it 1,000 times. And then he played. It wasn't perfect. His fingers stumbled once, and he made no move to hide it. But the melody was familiar, soft, slow, and painfully beautiful. Her breath caught halfway through. That's what I sang, she said quietly. I know, he replied without looking up. It's been stuck in my head since the wedding. You memorized it? I looked it up, then taught myself. Tessa didn't know what to say. No one had ever learned a song for her. Certainly not a billionaire. When he stopped, the silence felt deeper than before. Dinner's ready, he said, standing. The kitchen was already set. One long table, 2 places, soft candlelight though it was barely dusk. Platters of roasted vegetables, grilled halibut, and something that looked like risotto steamed gently between them. She sat, still trying to find footing in a world that moved too fast, too high above everything she understood. You didn't have to do this, she said. I know. So why? Soren looked at her evenly. I'm not interested in small talk. I know what I want. And I don't wait long to go after it. She hesitated. You don't even know me. I know enough. And I want to know more. She reached for her glass, then stopped. What happened to you that made you so sure all the time? He didn't answer right away, cutting a piece of fish with deliberate precision. Then he said, my father died when I was 19. He left me everything and no instructions. I had to either become someone who took control or let everyone take it from me. Tessa's voice softened. And your mother? She left when I was 10. Some days I'm not sure she was ever really there. The air shifted. She leaned back slightly, folding her arms. That's a lot of loss. It forces clarity, he said. You learn what matters. And what doesn't? She nodded slowly, unsure of how to respond. It wasn't the kind of thing you expected to hear over lemon risotto and imported wine. What about you? He asked. What made you stop singing? She blinked. I didn't stop. You're not on a stage. I couldn't afford to be. Money can be handled. She frowned. Not by everyone. I could help. The words hung in the air like something too heavy for either of them to catch. She set her fork down. Is that what this is? You wine me, dine me, and then sponsor me. No, he said, voice low. I want to know you. That includes what you want. What you gave up. I didn't give it up. I just put it on hold. For how long? She looked away. Until it stops hurting. He was quiet for a moment. Then I can't fix your past. But I can give you space to dream again. Her eyes met his and something shifted in her. Not trust not yet, but something that felt like the start of it. After dinner, he offered to drive her home. She declined, saying she preferred the subway. He didn't argue, just walked her to the elevator. She turned before stepping in. You don't scare me, by the way. I didn't think I did. You want too much too fast. But I'm not afraid of that. I'm afraid of liking it. He didn't smile. Then let's take it slow. She studied him one last time, then nodded. Good night, Soren. He watched the doors close, not moving until they did. The next morning, Tessa found a package outside her apartment. No note, just a slim black box with a single white ribbon. Inside was a pair of concert tickets. Front row, Carnegie Hall. A performance by one of the most elusive sopranos in the world, someone Tessa had once written about in a notebook she thought no one would ever read. She hadn't told him about her. Hadn't even mentioned the name. But somehow Soren had known. That night, she sat in the audience in a borrowed dress from her best friend, fingers clenched around the ticket stub, heart racing. The music pierced her in ways she hadn't expected. Halfway through the second act, she realized she was crying. When it ended, she stepped into the aisle, only to find Soren waiting at the end of it. You came, she said, wiping her eyes quickly. I wanted to see your face when she sang. I didn't tell you about her. He shrugged. You keep a journal in your bag. The cover was open last week. I saw a line you wrote about her performance in Milan. She stared at him. You read my journal? I read one line, and I remembered it. They walked outside together, the night cool against her bare shoulders. He handed her a scarf, light, cashmere, unfamiliar. It's not mine, she said. I had it sent here after dinner. I figured you'd forget a coat. She wrapped it around her. You're not very good at being normal. I'm not trying to be. They stood on the sidewalk, the street quiet for once. She looked up at him. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. Her pulse fluttered. I can't fall for someone who lives in the sky, she whispered. Then I'll come down, he said. Just say the word. And for the first time since the wedding, she didn't feel like a girl pretending to fit into someone else's life. She felt like someone whose life was just beginning to unfold. Not because of him, but because she finally wanted it to. The first time Tessa stepped into the Callahan Foundation building, she realized two things. One, that every inch of it had been built to impress, and two, that she was suddenly very aware of her shoes. The receptionist greeted her by name without her needing to say it. A man in a navy suit escorted her to the elevator. And when the doors opened on the top floor, there was Soren, leaning against the edge of his desk, sleeves rolled, phone in hand, but eyes already waiting for her. You're early, he said, slipping the phone into his pocket. I didn't want to be late, she replied, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Though I might have overdressed. You didn't. His gaze lingered, slower than polite, warmer than professional. Come in. The office was massive, one entire wall made of windows that looked out over the skyline. A sleek meeting table stretched across one side, and behind his desk, framed photographs and abstract art hung in measured, deliberate order. It was a room built by someone who didn't waste time but who appreciated beauty when it served a purpose. She sat across from him, her hands folded carefully on her lap. I wasn't expecting an invitation to your office, she said. Last I checked, we were still pretending this was casual. I'm not pretending anything, he said. I wanted you to see what I'm building. Not the portfolio. The real work. He opened a drawer, pulled out a slim folder, and pushed it toward her. She hesitated before opening it. Inside were photos, some grainy, some high-resolution, of children, schools, music programs, and handwritten letters addressed to the foundation. At the top of the page was a name she didn't recognize, the Callahan Youth Arts Initiative. I started it 6 years ago, he said. It's one of our smaller projects. Low press. Low return. But it means something. She flipped through slowly. You fund music programs? In schools that lost them. Community centers. Orphanages. He leaned back. I know what it's like to lose art when life gets in the way. Her fingers paused on a letter written in crayon. It thanked him for a donated cello. Why show me this? Because I want you to help me grow it. She looked up sharply. You want me to work for you? I want you to help design the next phase. Expand it. Make it better. His voice stayed even, but something flickered behind it. You know music in a way my team doesn't. You know what it feels like to need it. She stared down at the folder. I'm not qualified. You're perfect for it. What if this changes things between us? He stood, walked around the desk, and sat on the edge beside her. It already has. Her pulse jumped. You're serious. I don't offer things I don't mean. She closed the folder slowly. This isn't just about music, is it? No, he said. It's about you. And what happens when you stop standing on the sidelines? The silence between them stretched, taut and unspoken. I'll think about it, she said. Good. Think fast. Later that week, she said yes. It wasn't about the money, not that she didn't notice the generous salary or the sleek new laptop delivered to her door within 24 hours. It was about purpose. About waking up and knowing she would spend her day building something that could actually matter. And reluctantly about him. Soren didn't hover. He didn't micromanage. But he always knew when to check in, when to listen, when to push. After a month of working together, they had developed a rhythm and unspoken pace that neither of them questioned. Until the night he took her to the gallery. She'd finished editing a pitch deck for a new initiative in Queens and was just about to leave when he appeared at her door, coat in hand. There's something I want you to see. I'm not dressed for anything public, she said, glancing down at her jeans and oversized sweater. You'll be fine. He wasn't wrong. The gallery was tucked between a florist and a wine bar in Soho, and when they stepped inside, Tessa realized it wasn't a public showing. The lights were low, the space empty except for one older man adjusting lighting near the back. Soren greeted him with a handshake, then led her to the center of the room. The painting was enormous, 7 feet tall, framed in wood, depicting a woman standing alone on a shoreline, hair wild in the wind, eyes closed, mouth open in song. The colors were stormy, the lines soft, and somehow it felt more alive than anything she'd ever seen on canvas. She reminds me of you, he said. Tessa didn't speak, afraid that if she did, her voice might betray her. The artist's name is Varela, he continued. He only paints women he's never met. Dreams. Concepts. His collectors wait years. She turned to him slowly. You bought this. I commissioned it. When? 3 weeks after the wedding. She stared at him. You didn't even know me. I knew enough to want the rest. Her throat tightened. Soren. I'm not asking you to say anything back, he said, stepping closer. I just want you to understand that this isn't temporary for me. You're not a phase. You're not a song I heard once and forgot. The room felt too still. I don't know how to be what you're used to, she said. I don't want what I'm used to. Her hand brushed against the edge of the painting's frame. I've never had anyone see me like this. Then they weren't paying attention. She turned to him, her eyes bright with something between fear and wonder. You make it hard to keep this simple. I've never cared for simple. That night, she didn't go home. They didn't rush. There was no urgency, no desperation. Just quiet conversations on the terrace of his penthouse, wine and laughter scattered between shared glances and the slow, steady realization that whatever this was, it had already taken root. The next morning, she stood at the window, coffee in hand, watching the city wake up. You're not afraid anymore, he said, coming up behind her. I'm still afraid, she replied. I'm just not running from it. He wrapped his arms around her waist, his voice steady in her ear. Then stay. She leaned back against him. I'm not going anywhere. But not everything could stay untouched. Later that week, while preparing for a presentation at the foundation, Tessa opened an old email account she hadn't checked in months, one she used to use when submitting music demos back when she still believed someone might listen. There was a message from a production company. They'd heard a clip from the wedding, someone had recorded it and posted it online. They were interested in meeting her. She stared at the screen for a long time, the cursor blinking like a dare. When she told Soren, he didn't look surprised. I wondered when someone would notice, he said. You knew. I saw the video the night it went up. It's been shared over 200,000 times. Her heart stuttered. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to influence your decision. This has to be yours. She pressed her fingers to her forehead. This changes everything. No, it doesn't, he said softly. It just makes the future bigger. But what about the foundation? The work I'm doing. It'll be here. And so will I. She looked at him, her chest tight. I don't want to lose this. You won't. But you can't silence yourself again just because you're afraid of what might change. She swallowed hard. What if I fail? He stepped forward, touching her cheek gently. Then I'll be the one clapping the loudest when you try again. And as much as the panic rose in her, something stronger did too. Hope. She took a breath, nodded, and whispered, okay. And just like that, the girl who sang at a wedding took her first real step into the life she'd almost given up on, knowing now that the man who had first heard her sing wasn't just falling for her anymore. He already had. Tessa stepped onto the rooftop garden of the Midtown Theater, stunned silent by the sheer scale of the evening. Below her, Manhattan glowed in gold and violet, the skyline sharp against the dusk. White lanterns swayed in the breeze, suspended from steel arches wrapped in live ivy. A string quartet played something haunting and beautiful, the notes floating like mist above the city. It was the launch celebration for the Callahan Youth Arts Initiative expansion, a project she'd helped bring to life, brick by brick, over the past 4 months. And tonight, it was no longer an idea on paper. It was a reality. A scholarship fund, a national tour, and fully funded music programs in over 30 schools, all under her name as co-director. She hadn't expected that detail. It had been Soren's surprise, revealed only when the press release went live. Her name standing beside his on every banner, every invitation, every news story. She felt his presence before he spoke. You're late, he said behind her, his voice low and warm. Tessa turned, breath-catching. He wore a dark navy tuxedo, the kind that looked like it had been tailored with him in mind, as if the fabric would never fit another man again. His hair was combed back neatly, but there was still a lock that refused to behave near his temple. I was checking the soundboard, she said. The speakers were too sharp. They fixed it. Of course you checked the soundboard. You asked me to run the program. I asked you to run it, not to worry yourself into exhaustion. She lifted a brow. Are you suggesting I relax? I'm suggesting you try letting someone else take care of things tonight. Just this once. He offered his hand. She hesitated for only a second before placing hers in his. He guided her toward the center terrace, where the gala guests were gathered, donors, artists, educators, and more than a few celebrities, all mingling beneath a canopy of lights. But when they saw her, the crowd parted. Applause began not for him, but for her. She froze. Soren leaned toward her ear. You earned this. Every second of it. She swallowed, stepping forward. The MC took the mic, introduced her, and before she could blink, she was standing under a spotlight with hundreds of eyes on her. Her voice didn't shake. I used to think music was something you had to chase alone, she began. Something that left when life got too loud. But I was wrong. Music doesn't leave. Sometimes it just waits for someone to hear it again. And because of this program, thousands of students will hear it maybe for the first time. She looked at Soren. Their eyes met. She smiled. And if I've learned anything, she continued, it's that the right people don't just hear your voice. They make space for it. The applause was softer this time, but more powerful. Sincere. She stepped down from the stage, her chest tight with something she couldn't name. After the speeches, there was dancing. Not formal. Not rehearsed. Just joy spilling from the corners of the rooftop like champagne. Tessa moved through the crowd, hugging donors, thanking volunteers, laughing with the students who'd flown in from Detroit and Charlotte to perform. Their excitement was contagious. She turned a corner near the bar and found Soren speaking with a woman in her 60s, elegant and poised, wearing a red dress that fit her like a secret. Tessa didn't interrupt. She waited. When he spotted her, he excused himself and crossed the floor. Are you hiding? He asked. I'm recharging. Come with me. Before she could protest, he took her hand and led her through a narrow hallway and up a spiral staircase she hadn't noticed earlier. At the top, a small room weighted glass walls, a single piano in the center, and a view that made the city look like it had paused just to listen. She stepped inside carefully, as though the quiet might shatter. He closed the door behind them. I bought this building 3 years ago, he said. I kept the space untouched. I didn't know why at the time. Her fingers grazed the piano lid. I think you did. He pulled something from his jacket pocket. A small velvet box. Her heart stilled. Soren. He didn't open it. Not yet. I've spent years trying to control everything, he said. My company. My image. My heart. And then you walked into that wedding and sang like you'd never been told to be quiet. You didn't ask for attention. You didn't want it. But you had it. She looked down, overwhelmed. You didn't just impress me, Tessa. You undid me. You made me remember what it's like to want something without a plan. To feel something and not analyze it to death. I didn't fall in love with you because you're talented or brave or smart, that you are all of those things. I fell in love with you because you make the world feel like it's worth slowing down for. Her breath trembled. I don't want to be the man who watches your life from the balcony. I want to be beside you every note, every risk, every silence. Then he opened the box. Inside was a ring, a single emerald-cut diamond set in platinum, elegant and clear, no flourishes. I'm not asking you to leave your music. I'm asking if I can be part of the song. Tessa stared at the ring, then at him. Her voice was quiet but steady. You didn't need to bring me to a rooftop to do this. I didn't want to do it anywhere else. She took the ring from the box herself, holding it between her fingers. Then slowly she slid it onto her hand. He exhaled, almost laughing. That's a yes, he asked. Yes, she whispered. That's a yes. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a kind of reverence that made the room feel sacred. There was no audience. No applause. Just breath and warmth and the knowledge that something irreversible had just been spoken between them. When they finally pulled apart, she leaned against him, her voice still soft. Promise me something. Anything. No matter what changes, we keep choosing each other. Even when it's messy. He kissed her temple. Especially when it's messy. Outside, the music continued. The city kept moving. But in that glass room above it all, two people stood still, no longer strangers from a wedding. No longer afraid of what might be. They were a beginning. A girl who once sang quietly in the corners of her life. And the man who heard her and never stopped listening. The late spring sun streamed through the windows of the newly finished Callahan Youth Arts Center in Brooklyn, catching the light on the polished floors and freshly painted mural that stretched across the atrium wall. Children's laughter echoed distantly from an upstairs classroom, mingling with the faint hum of violins tuning in the rehearsal space. The center wasn't just open, it was alive. Tessa stood in her new office, barefoot on the cool tile, clutching a steaming mug of coffee while staring at the framed photograph on the wall. It was a candid shot, a student holding a cello with visible pride, wearing headphones too large for his head and a grin that refused to be contained. Behind him, on the whiteboard, in a child's handwriting, was a message: music gave me my voice. She hadn't cried when the center opened. Not during the ribbon cutting, not during the mayor's speech, and not even when the students performed the original piece composed by the first scholarship cohort. But now, alone in the calm after the whirlwind, she felt emotion rise up like a tide. A knock pulled her from the swell. She turned as Soren leaned in the doorway, his tie gone, his sleeves pushed back, and a faint crease between his brows that only appeared when he was trying not to admit how much something mattered to him. You weren't at the press debrief, he said before stepping inside. I thought maybe you'd escaped. She set the mug down gently. I needed a moment. He studied her face for a heartbeat. You okay? I'm more than okay. She walked to him and slid her arms around his waist. I just didn't expect this to feel so final. His hand brushed the back of her neck. It's not final. It's the first chapter. Still, it's strange. For so long, I thought I'd never get here. And now I'm standing in an office with my name on the door, and I feel like someone else is going to walk in and tell me there's been a mistake. They won't. He kissed her forehead. You're here because you built this. Not alone. No, he said. But without you, none of it would have mattered. Her phone buzzed from the desk and she glanced down. It's the music director from the touring program, she said. He wants to finalize the dates for the student showcase. Let it wait. But he took the phone, placed it face down, and tilted her chin up with 2 fingers. Sometimes it's okay to just be here. You've earned at least 5 uninterrupted minutes. She leaned into him. You always know when I need to be pulled back. No, he said. I've just learned to listen when you don't say it out loud. They stayed like that for another moment, the soft click of shoes in the hallway the only sound around them. Then she pulled back. There's one more thing I want to do today. He raised an eyebrow. Tell me. She smiled. I want to go back. Back where? She didn't answer. 2 hours later, they stood in front of the little bookstore where she used to spend her mornings unpacking boxes and her evenings dreaming through the display window. It hadn't changed much. The paint was still chipped on the side panel and the bell above the door still rang with a tired wheeze. Inside, the same owner greeted her with wide eyes and a quick embrace. "I saw you on the news," she said, pulling Tessa into a hug that smelled faintly of old paper and cinnamon tea. "You looked like a woman who'd finally caught her breath." Tessa laughed. "Maybe I did." Soren wandered the aisles while Tessa chatted, his fingers brushing worn spines and dog-eared pages. She found him 10 minutes later, standing in the poetry section with a thin volume opened in his hands. "You used to read this one," he said, handing it to her. "I remember. You quoted it once." She looked at the page. It was a poem about belonging not to places or people but to moments that changed you. "I didn't think you remembered that." "I remember everything." Later, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned lavender, they walked hand in hand through the park near her old apartment. A small jazz trio played near the fountain and a little girl ran past them in a tutu, trailing ribbon behind her like a comet. "You know," she said, watching her go, "there was a time when I thought this was all I'd ever have. Window shopping dreams. Second-hand books. Singing to no one." He stopped walking. "And now I have a front row seat to my own life. And someone to share it with." He pulled her close, his eyes steady. "There's something I haven't told you." Her brow furrowed. "What?" "I bought the brownstone." She blinked. "What brownstone?" "The one across the street from the music school in the West Village. The one you always glance at when we drive by. You once said it was the kind of place you could imagine coming home to. You bought it." "I did. And I had the top floor converted into a soundproof studio. Not because I expect you to use it every day, but because I never want you to feel like you have to ask for space to create." She stared at him. "You did all that without telling me?" "I wanted it to be ready for when you were." She didn't answer, not with words. She kissed him, slow and certain, like she was anchoring herself in a truth she no longer had to question. That night, they stood in the center of the brownstone's living room, surrounded by empty walls and possibility. She wandered through each room, barefoot again, just like the first time she'd stepped into his penthouse. But this place was different. This wasn't a palace in the clouds. This was home. He caught her hand as she passed the hallway and pulled her back toward him. "We'll fill it with whatever you want," he said. "Music, paintings, silence, laughter. We can host dinners or hide from the world. It's yours as much as it's mine." She smiled. "You know what I want? Tell me." "Curtains that blow in the breeze. A kitchen with a record player. Mismatched mugs. And a piano in the sunlight." He ran his thumb along her jaw. "Then we'll have all of that." They didn't rush to move in. They took their time. Piece by piece, the house became theirs. She picked out second-hand chairs with stories in their upholstery. He installed a coffee machine that ground beans to the exact coarseness she liked. They argued over paint colors and agreed on light fixtures. He filled the fridge with her favorite snacks before every trip she returned from. She left notes in the books he read late at night. The studio upstairs became more than a room. It became a refuge, a canvas, a haven where she rediscovered parts of herself she hadn't realized she'd buried. Her music changed. It wasn't desperate anymore. It wasn't about being heard. It was about speaking. When her album released the following spring, it debuted to quiet acclaim. Not viral, not flash, but meaningful. The kind of music people played when they needed to remember they weren't alone. And through it all, he stayed beside her, not as a savior, not as a benefactor, but as a partner. The man who had once watched her from the back of a wedding crowd now stood front and center in her life, never asking her to shrink, never needing her to shine a certain way. They didn't rush into forever. They didn't need to. Love wasn't a race. It was a rhythm. But one warm summer evening, as they sat on the brownstone's rooftop beneath soft string lights, feet tangled and wine untouched, she took his hand and said, "I still remember what you said about wanting to be part of the song." He looked at her, no hesitation in his eyes. "I meant it. Then let's write the next verse." And they did. Together.